How we doing, everyone? It is an honor to be here with you. Every day a color of change, every year, every election, every campaign, we ask ourselves one question. How is what we're doing going to make Black people more powerful? Powerful enough to not just protect ourselves, but to transform this country. Because when Black people are powerful, this country changes. We leap forward. Every dream, every issue in the progressive agenda depends on Black people being in the fight. Being not just present, but powerful. So when I think about the 2020 census and the 2020 election, both of which will shape the reality for decades and beyond that, as a movement overall, we have to get this moment right. Together as progressives, many of us in this room, we have made the Democratic Party a bit nervous about our collective power. And that's a good thing. But we have to use and leverage that to do more than just mobilize voters. We have to mobilize an entire nation to shake up and reshape the way that society works and who it works for. And we will not do that unless we make corporate executives nervous too. So, I know that our campaigns, our corporate campaigns at Color of Change are successful when we're making corporate executives nervous. That is how we stopped corporations and companies from enabling white nationalists, both on the streets and those that have infiltrated the administration, from being able to fund them through our No Blood Money campaign. We showed campaigns that they would pay a price, and that we must use and think about the power of corporations to change culture. But there's a lot that we have to remember here. And why is corporate power, why is facing corporate power so important? Because we've got to remember what it's all rooted in. Wall Street was a slave market for Africans and Native Americans before it was a market to sell stocks, bonds, and commodities. The norms of treating people's lives as having greater than others was started long before Donald Trump ever got into office. And the idea remains institutionalized across so many in society. The corporations that fund private prisons, and the climate destroyers, and healthcare deniers, and the media information propagators. For us at Color of Change, is animated in our founding. We were born in the aftermath of a flood that was caused by bad decision makers. Black people were literally on their roofs begging for the government to do something, and they were left to die. But the thing about Katrina wasn't just the flood that took over New Orleans. It was the flood of bad decisions that happened long before and the flood of bad decisions that happened long after, that left so many in pain, that created so much loss. Our founders realized that at that moment, no one was nervous about disappointing Black people. Government, corporations, media, government ignoring us, media calling folks looters and attacking those who were in peril, and corporations fleecing the city and keeping people out of the rebuild. Color of Change was born as a new way to enable everyday people to take action, to translate the analysis and outrage they had into the ability to make real change, to create a less hostile and human world, not just for Black people, but for all people. You know, I would love to say that in the last 14 years since our founding, that things have gotten easier. Bush v. Gore, Citizens United, Shelby, and so many other decisions that have animated taking away the power from progressives and giving new power to the right has made so much of our work harder. All of those things come with the idea that Black people's lives are not as valuable as white folks' lives, and that people of color are expendable in so many ways. We cannot let corporations off the hook for this right-wing takeover. We must hold the enablers accountable. Right now, Color of Change is not just at the table talking to tech companies about their policies and practices. We're also going to shareholder meetings and other places that they see valuable to bring our members' voices to those tables and push for the type of change. Not creating a false sense of neutrality around race, but bringing the type of change necessary to move us forward. We cannot fight corporate power in politics only by fighting them in the political realm. We have to build the type of cultural power if we're gonna win. But most of all, y'all, we've gotta pay attention to culture. We've gotta watch TV and pay attention to where people are at. We've gotta pay attention to what people are watching in the movies, and we can't think we are better than the people we hope to mobilize and engage. You know, shortly after I started at Color of Change, I launched this campaign to go after this TV star. And, you know, we went after the advertisers. We were outraged by this TV star who was saying racist things and advancing racist narratives. And we got some folks in the room to join us, but most of the people we went to said a number of things to us. They said, you know, we know that corporations are sponsoring this person, but, you know, we don't really do pop culture. We don't, you know, we care about issues and policies. You know, so much of what we think about on the right is, you know, not what's on TV. And so I understand that Color of Change wants to do this campaign, but we're gonna stay away from this pop star, this celebrity, this reality show star. And that was a mistake. It was a mistake for many reasons, because when we ignore the ways that culture precedes policy, that culture leads our ability to actually understand how issues are formed and how people get their views, then we make mistakes about not truly understanding where things are going. So the corporation sponsored, and the corporation stayed in. And they sent a powerful, powerful message that it was okay. And in the process, many of us in the progressive movement stood down and did not take that fight. And imagine if we had won. Imagine if we had saw culture as just as powerful as those issues and those policies. Imagine if we had recognized that we can't allow someone to be on TV once a week and go around the country advancing racist narratives and let corporations who say buy our products and use our services get away with it. Imagine if we had done that work and understood the power of culture, where we might be right now as a movement. Because culture is power. And far too often we give that power away far too cheap. We let corporations join LGBT pride parades while sponsoring candidates and supporting candidates that want to destroy LGBT lives. We let corporations join us for Black History Month celebrations while doing everything to turn back the clock on the victories that Black people have had in this country. Why we talk about Black history in the first place. And we let corporations talk about women empowerment when they care neither about women or empowerment. And we let that happen time and time again. If we don't build the type of infrastructure that thinks as much about culture as we do about politics, we will continue to mistake presence for power and not actually have the change that we need. So how do we do this, y'all? I want to submit to you that we've got to think very clearly about what we center. And for me, I fundamentally believe that racial justice is not charity, it is strategy. Racial justice is the force that not only gets people out of their seats, but gets people to the polls. There is no greater avenue for making change in this country right now than centering racial justice. And I'm not talking about sort of as a side avenue or something we feel like we have to do so we don't get in trouble with the Black and brown people, but seeing it as a force multiplier. Black freedom, freedom for people of color as a force multiplier. When we make change on those issues, we can win on healthcare, we can win on immigration, and we can win on wages and so much more, because the forces that are holding us back understand that they have to stop racial justice in order to win. And a case in point is everything that's happening in cities around the country as people are showing up to the polls to change our criminal justice system, electing district attorneys, showing up to change bail practices, and so much more. These folks are not avoiding the conversation about racial justice, but centering it, leveraging racial justice as the mobilizing force it is to get people out of their seats, to get people engaged and driving people to action. And at the same time, recognizing that we've got to change the story. We've got to recognize that just because we say something over and over again doesn't mean that people understand it. So this slide right here shows basically that for the last 20 years in this country, violent crime has steadily went down. But if you ask most Americans, they think violent crime has gone up. So your talking points and op-ed pieces are not going to change this. They just won't. If we are not thinking very clearly about the avenues by which people are getting their information, developing their opinions, because this chart is not a mistake. This chart represents the strategies of our opponents from Hollywood to Washington, who have made investments in keeping the profiteers of the criminal justice system in place, of ensuring that we fund more police in schools rather than teachers and counselors, that we fund more prisons instead of more hospitals and mental health, that the investments and the money go certain places than others. So when people think about what they need to solve, they have a different perception than the actual reality. But I do believe that we are winning. I believe we are winning all around the country. And I think that the folks in Philadelphia are a perfect example. Groups like the Philadelphia Community Bail Project, Media Mobilizing Project, the Reclaim Philly, Power, Frontline Dads, and so many more are part of a movement of folks that are working not only to push for change at the ballot box and in communities, but also fighting back against the attacks. We at Color of Change are working across Hollywood to change the story about race and crime in people's minds, and also working to bring people together into community, to break past the transactional way that we engage people and move to more transactional ways, bringing people together in brunches and conversations, helping people see themselves as collectively together, and then thinking about how they want to win justice together. And thinking about the range of issues that we can work on to build, but thinking about what does it mean to be in community first and build towards issues second, being able to see each other and work with one another. So I want to end on a couple of points. The first is that we've got some things that I believe we've got to do from a strategy perspective. There's some things that I know that we've got to do if we're going to win not just elections, but win the type of changes that make people's lives better. First, we've got to strengthen movement organizations, because this is not just about giving politicians jobs. This is about making people's lives fundamentally better. And if we are not investing in local organizations and national organizations and regional organizations, we will not have the infrastructure necessary. This is not about electing another messiah, but about building collective power for real people and real communities that can bring about real change. And we've got to invest in people, and this is not just getting more volunteers to follow the direction of their campaign staff. This is about giving people in motion and bringing them together in ways that allow them to see themselves as powerful too. We've got to center racial justice and make sure that we recognize that racial justice wins. And I'm not just talking about making sure that racial justice is present in your talking points about climate change. I am talking about making sure that racial justice is a strategy for gaining power and winning power, recognizing that people can come first to opening up the planet, and so much more. Recognizing that racial justice isn't charity, but racial justice is strategy. And finally, we've got to work to not just get our story out, but to get our story in. And what I mean by that is we have to work to embed our stories in the hearts and minds of everyday people. And that means focusing on narrative infrastructure, changing the rules of news and Hollywood and all the places where people actually get their information, are informed by how the world moves. We have to recognize that our talking points alone will not change the embedded perceptions people have about our communities, but our ability to engage in the ways that people actually get information has the power to. And finally, I'm going to end where sort of I began. These are my maternal grandparents, Charlie and Matilda Trent. They're in my mom's garden on Eastern Long Island. They are no longer with us. My grandparents came to Eastern Long Island as part of the Great Migration in the 30s. From the farm fields of Virginia, the pain, the segregation, and the violence of the South, to the pain, the segregation, and the violence of the North. And they got there, and they faced all of the issues that we talk about and will have panels about here at this conference. The issues of geographic segregation and redlining, the issues of police violence and criminal justice, the issues of job security. I think about what it meant for my grandmother to have to show up for everybody else first and never have to show up for herself. I think about them a lot, not because I'm making a point about Black pain and Black struggle. I want to make a point about joy, because that's also what they had. They had joy because they recognized that there was something aspirational in a fight for a better day. My grandfather used to bring me into the voting booth and put me on his shoulder and let me pull the lever, and we would sometimes read out the names. And I didn't find out till after my grandfather died that he actually couldn't read or write. He never got a formal education. But every single day, he wanted to participate. He wanted to engage, whether it was in his church or community group or with his family, and believe that there was a better tomorrow that was there. I stand up here, and so many of us are in this room because there are people who came before us. I stand here before as the Black gay leader of a next generation racial justice organization with one of the fiercest staffs that this movement knows, and 1.5 million members that drives our everyday work, because there were people who had joy, that were willing to pick up voting cards when people said that they couldn't. That there were people that were willing to pick up union cards when they said that they shouldn't. There were people who were willing to pick up rocks to start new movements and willing to pick up picket signs and protest. And all of those people helped to reshape the society we live in today and work for a better tomorrow. Because when we recognize that we all exist, when we all matter, then we will not just talk about the vision for a better tomorrow, but we will pair that vision with the type of infrastructure and strategy that actually leads towards real change. Because it's not enough to have a list of issues if we don't have joy and the infrastructure to deliver on it. If we don't have the ability to translate presence into power, we will never make justice real. But I believe that we can win, and every single day there are signs of it in local communities and national communities. So if we have the ability and the fight and the focus, let us stand up and continue to work together, because it's not just about 2020, it's about our fight for a future where all of us can be heard, counted, and visible, regardless of whether we are privileged or vulnerable, in the majority or the minority, or in favor or out of favor with whoever is in power. That is how we win, my friends. Thank you all very much.